Okay, let's get started. The Otzros Hashem. Okay, so we are now in the first lines of the actual text, and so let's read the line. Da kitchilas hakol hayakol hametzius or pashut v'nikra Ein Sof v'lo haya sham shum chalal v'shum avir panui ela hakol haya or Ein Sof. Okay, so know, become aware, right? Da. At the beginning of everything, or at the origin of everything, all of existence was just a singular simple light. And that light is referred to as Ein Sof, that which is without limit. And there was no vacant space whatsoever, nor was there any empty air. Rather, everything was just the infinite light. Okay, so one more time in Hebrew, and then we'll just kind of like go through the words. Da, right? So da, already when Rabbi Nachman uses da, the language of da, it's reflective of keser. That's what the tzaddikim say. It means that da means you are now being introduced to an idea that will be very familiar to you. It's already confirmed within you. You know this idea, and therefore you can be called to intuitively know it. Da, it's a call to knowledge, and a call to knowledge means that you already have the basic infrastructural inner knowing of what Pnimius Torah is coming to say, how Hashem created the universe. Otherwise, it wouldn't stick, right? If it wasn't an idea that was deeply embedded within us from the womb, so then it would be like any other system. The call of Da is like, listen to this new voice that's going to awaken within you an ancient echo that feels more familiar than anything can possibly be. Right? And so it already sets the student into a very different posture of receiving the information. Ever with me on this point? I'm describing now how I understand Da in Likutei Maharan, and I'm going to go from there and apply that to the Da over here in the language of the Arizal. And so Da means that you're coming to understand an intuitively known truth that you couldn't have access to and you had no idea about until the letters were revealed in front of you. Right? Like it's new information has come to light, but that information is somehow always already known already. Because the Arizal is not coming to be machadesh anything, heaven forbid. The Arizal is coming to teach us Aleph Beis. Again, the same process of Torah that's always been revealed. So Da, come and know something intuitive. That's the system of the Ari. Kitchilas hakol hayakol hametzius or pashut. A simple light that's referred to as infinitude, Ein Sof. And there was no vacant space and there was no empty air, but rather everything was the infinite light. So there's endless textual kind of openings here that we can focus in. For example, Rav Chaim Vital is writing, Kitchilas hakol, the beginning of everything. This is something that is happening at the beginning of everything. This is how existence comes into shape. It's not before the beginning. It's part of the beginning. At the beginning of everything, all of existence was a simple light. How is there existence before the beginning of everything? If the beginning of everything is the beginning of existence. And that is enough already to set a person on the path of trying to understand the infinite light before creation and after creation. And then we come into this concept, okay, so what was before existence as we know it? So the Arizal's language is an Or Pashut, a simple light. Now Pashut, what does simple mean? Simple means non-composite, right? It's basic in its ingredients. It's itself. It's nothing other than itself. It's not contingent upon any other harchava or duplication or add-ons. It is its essential self. It's simple. That's what Pashut means, simplicity. But what does it mean for there to have been a simple light? Does it mean that it was undifferentiated? Does it mean that it was infantile and undeveloped? What does Pashut mean? And what does Or mean? What light are we talking about? If it's before existence, so how do we already come onto the concept of, the natural phenomenon through which existence takes shape, which is light. Light is a fundamental existent form. But now the Arizal is telling us that there's a notion of light even before existence. And furthermore, then there's a metaphor within a metaphor, so to speak, that this simple light that existed before all of existence as we know it is referred to as Ein Sof. It's referred to as Ein Sof. Ein Sof, what is it? What's Ein Sof? What's infinite? Is it an endless light? Is it an infinite light? Or is it the light of the infinite? Meaning to say, what is Ein Sof over here? Now, what has to come into context is exactly like you said. There's no Hey Hayediyah here. There's no Ha Ein Sof. The Arizal, the Rav Chaim Vital is not offering the possibility.
The end of this piece, the end, the last words of the piece.
So we'll see. We'll see. We'll see when we get to the end of the piece in Mitzvah Hashem. Meaning Sof Masav Machshavat Tchila always, but Be'ezras Hashem. And so over here it's saying Ein Sof and not Ha Ein Sof. Why? Because this is, again, the fundamental introduction that I will repeat over and over and over and over and over, because there's really no other teaching that a person has to grab hold of, which is Kedushasi Lamala Mikdushaseichem. When we speak about godliness, we are not talking about God himself in his absolute, essential, existent form, so to speak. We are not speaking of the essence of God. We're never speaking of the essence of God, even though essence is itself a concept that's already caught up in symbolism and kind of translation. But even that we're not speaking about. The thing that we can't truly speak about, obviously we're not speaking about, but we're never coming to lay claim to setting parameters to the essential nature of godliness, which we can only grasp by way of affirming its independent, non-contingent existence, as the Rambam brings down lahalacha in Yesodei HaTorah and in Ahava and in all of the Svar and in Mada. And so the simplest introduction is that Leis Machshava Tvisa Beklal. There's no grasping the infinite essence itself. Again, that's the introduction. What has to come next is the recognition that when we say that, at the very same moment, we're not denying, God forbid, the presence of the infinite essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unnameable, ungraspable, unthinkable existent. Everything is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ein od milvado, we just read in Torah's Moshe, Ein od milvado. There's nothing other than me. There's nothing other than godliness. So obviously, we're not talking about the presence of the essence of God, so to speak. We're talking about graspability. The Arizal was revealing graspable forms of thinking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Nikra Ein Sof, it's infinite. The light is infinite. It's not the infinite itself. Everything that we're going to talk about, even at the highest levels, is only an expression of the infinite itself. Everybody with me? The Leshem, Shabova Achloma, in the second part of Sefer Hakdamus Sha'arim, he wrote something called Shar HaPoina Kadim. Shar HaPoina Kadim is the gate that opens up once a week on Shabbos, as the Navi tells us. And Shar HaPoina Kadim is an introduction to another student of the Arizal, other than Rav Chaim Vital, and his name was Rav Yisrael Saruv, who was the beginning of Italian Kabbalah and one of the most fundamental bedrock pillars of Hasidus, as well as the Vilna Gaon. That Rav Hillel Parcher would walk around with an Emek HaMelech in his talis bag, and the Gra and his Talmidim were never without the writings of Rav Yisrael Sarug and the Olam HaMalbush. And we'll get there, Be'ezras Hashem. But at the beginning of this final parak, so he writes, the Leshem writes as follows: the one thing I want to keep in front of my eyes is the chruz, is the announcement from the Yordei HaMerkava, the Chasidei Ashkenaz, from Anim Zemiros, that Anim Zemiros B'Shirim Erov, Ke'elecha Nafshi Sarog. I want you, only you, nothing but you and your infinite essence, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kavyachol. When we run to him, we run directly to him. We don't get stuck in Tzimtzumim and attributes. But at the same point, when we're talking about language and systems, we're never talking about him himself. And that's the paradox of Jewish existence, that I reach him by way of acknowledging that I can't fully reach him. So I have Anim Zemiros B'Shirim Erov Ke'elecha Nafshi Sarov. Nafshi Chamda B'Tzel Yadacha Ladas Kol Ra Sodech. I want to know everything. And knowing everything is fundamentally knowing that you can't know everything. Aspaklaria de Meira, the clarified lens, is always the recognition of all I can grasp is the hither side of the next level. And so, but even though I can't grasp you in your essence, Kavyachol, Adamcha, Achancha, I'm going to imagine you, I'm going to create forms that are not forms, but rather conceptual realities that reveal the shape of the soul and become interfaces that enable our minds to reach beyond consciousness into the realm of infinitude and actually be purposeful there. That's the biggest secret of existence, that Hashem wants us to feel that we are so purposeful and we are so fundamental to the system. That's what these teachings are doing. But even though I'm giving you all of these dimyonos and kinuyim, v'lo yadasicha, I don't know you. In the end of the day, I don't know you. But that's not a renunciation on the attempt to grasp the essence of God, God forbid. That is in and of itself the grasping, the recognition that I can't grasp. Lo hisig. The schus that Moshe Rabbeinu turned his face away, he came to realize that Tumunas Hashem Yabit. He came to understand what we're talking about. The only access point to that infinite place is Emunah. Something Pashut, even more Pashut than Pashut. That somehow, some way, through spooky action at a distance, the awakening of Emunah at the core brings a person directly right up into the innermost point that a person can ever imagine. But as people who care about studying the words of the Arizal, we're trying to understand the system. So, Adamcha achancha v'lo yadasicha, b'yad neviyecha, b'sod avadecha, t'misa hadar kavod hedecha. This is the story of prophecy. This is the story of your holy ones who give a shape to the shapeless by never getting stuck in the shape of the shapeless, but using the imagined shape as an entry point to transform that shape into the awareness of shapelessness. Ein Sof. Rav Aaron Halevi Meister Celia says that there's no prat, there's no particular point of contemplation of existence, of Torah, of mitzvos, that once meditated upon ever so slightly, opens up directly to the grasp of the infinite presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu beyond any levels or gradations. Because every prat is saturated with the light. So this light, this simple light is called, that was more poetic than I tend to be in these shirim. Any questions or
Doesn't light like or imply a ma'or?
B'vadai. That's a fundamental inference. Right, the inference is that if we're speaking about Or, the existence of light, well, light is not self-generated. Nothing is self-generated. And therefore, the presence of the generation of light implies a prior luminary, so to speak, that gave shape to that light.
Absolutely.
No, light is a metaphor. Light is the simplest metaphor. It's the most thinned out form and grasp. It's the most dak of the dak. It's the most delicate of the delicate. I thought this week during the parsha, utmuna einam roim is Rosh Tevos Or. Right? That the interdiction against grasping the image of God is what leads us to utilize this metaphor of Or. Because Or is somehow, some way, a metaphor that doesn't get as clunky, and it enables exactly this inference point, which is the mi'or, the source of light.
Just backing up a little bit when you mentioned the other comment of that Rizal.
Rav Yisrael Sarun.
Maybe I heard it wrong, but I always thought that I heard the Rizal said that he has one comment of Chaim Vital.
Bevadai.
Whenever he wrote,
Bevadai. Only Rav Chaim Vital. Only Rav Chaim Vital. Only Rav Chaim Vital. All of the teachings of Mahari Sorug are implicit within the teachings of Rav Chaim Vital, but not revealed explicitly. Rav Aaron Halevi Meister Celia writes that his Rebbe, the Balatanya, praised Rav Chaim Vital for not speaking about these more transcendental kind of abstract realms of process and presence and openings and closings, rather than this more technical realm of like Tzimtzum and concealment. And the Balatanya praised him because he said that a person, if they come to think that they can grasp levels and high levels, then more often than not, a person might step into the territory of applying levels to the infinite light of Hashem, or to the infinite essence of Hashem, heaven forbid. So he praised them for not revealing them. But they're one and the same. They're two expressions of the Arizal. And so he's contained within, and not an extension of, but a further revelation of prior worlds. It's no different than Moshe Rabbeinu and the trained Mashiachin. meaning Moshe Rabbeinu, Mashiach ben David is obviously the only Mashiach, but there's also going to be an element of Mashiach ben Yosef, that every Moshe has two extensions of itself.
Like the Likutei Halachot.
Likutei Halachos and the living Talmidim, yeah. Rabbi Nachman has Likutei Halachos, Rabbi Nassan, and the reality of living Talmidim of Rabbeinu, the Ner Talmid, in every generation. So it's always two pathways, everybody.
Just to say that something is Ein Sof, when imply that there's a concept of Sof. In order to conjure something that there is no end, there needs to be a concept of.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Hasaga b'derech shtila, grasping that which is not said by way of its absence. Meaning like
Sof is a creation.
Sof is also a creation, and we're not up to the Tzimtzum yet. I just want to answer this question, and I'll come to you. Even the Kadmoinim, the Maharal brings from the Kadmoinim, from the Rishonim, and from the Kadmoinim, there's a klal of Yedias Hafachim Hi Achas, that the knowledge of opposites is ultimately fundamentally unified in the same. And the way that the early philosophers brought it up was that you can't discern the whiteness of white without knowing or contrasting it against the blackness of black. The Moreh Nevuchim is also filled with this wondrous svara. And
That means that you can't actually discern white without having black.
Bevadai. There's no existence on a certain level of it, which implies again that, like Yaakov pointed out, anytime we're speaking about any level of a revelation of an or, it implies something that's also concealed, which is a mi'or, which would be the same as if we're saying that there's Ein Sof, then on a certain level that would imply that there's a Sof also. And the truth of the matter, and what Gans Kabbalah is going to come to teach us, is that Sof that's ungraspable is just the bottom of the higher level. I don't want to get too lost in complications, but the Shlila, what we can't grasp, is always far greater than what we're capable of grasping. Right? To grasp something, Or Ein Sof, is a gilui that HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose to reveal as the entire shape of that which will unfold after he decided, so to speak, to create something other than himself. Or Ein Sof is not God himself. It's the greatest containment of all possibility. But that implies that prior to that light of Ein Sof, there was even something higher, which is the Gvul, which is Hasaga b'derech shlila, which is coming to a place of realizing that Or Ein Sof is ultimately coming to teach me that ultimately that's a light that is coming from something far beyond, the Baal Haratzon, so to speak. The Baal Haratzon, who we can't speak of. We can't speak of the Baal Haratzon. We can only speak of the Ratzon that's connected to the Baal Haratzon. And that Ratzon is fundamentally connected to the Baal Haratzon. But the moment we start talking about the Baal Haratzon is the moment that we're magshim and we're over the Isser of kind of creating definitions to the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is what the Arizal, this is the whole system of the Arizal. He'elem l'shem gilui, concealment for the sake of revelation. The knowledge that Hashem wants us to grasp Him, even though that the truest essence of God is ungraspable. But ultimately, this small, graspable concept that we can conjure up in our minds is the ultimate purpose of existence and the main desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Fine. I mean, there's so much. There's so much. There's endlessness. Another thing that there's Or Ein Sof here in the Arizal, but in the Otzros Chaim, we see in Shar HaKlalim, and it's also brought from a much earlier source called the Ma'ayan Chachma, which is ultimately attributed to Moshe Rabbeinu, Raya Mehemna. But Rav Yitzchak Moshe Erlinger Shlita has put out these remarkable svarim that are like Beruach HaKodesh on these ancient texts, showing how all of the ancient tzaddikim preceded the models that the Arizal is already saying. The Arizal was not being machadesh devarim; he was giving us the technological tools so that we can actually activate them and use them. Then Chassidus brings it down. But there they don't talk of Or Ein Sof, they talk of Meimei Ein Sof, endless water, which is another metaphor and a beautiful kind of Havdil Alfei Avdalos, more tangible and also more ethereal. It's much more Eretz Haisatov, Vavohu, V'choshech, V'ruach V'choshech. This abysmal depth and Mayim b'Mayim, right? We're still on Monday. No, we're not really on Monday anymore. But this Meimei Ein Sof, and one of my favorite places that I think it comes up most is in Rabbi Nachman's Tales in the 13 beggars on the tail of the sixth beggar, when he speaks of the princess who, in order to escape the evil prince, she has to run into the palace of water. And this palace of water is an impossibility because it's watery walls and watery pathways and watery hallways, but nevertheless it subsists and it maintains itself. And that's the secret of Meimei Ein Sof. And Lahavdil Alfei Avdalos, when Freud, Lahavdil Alfei Avdalos, when Freud was describing in letters kind of this, what he was aiming at, what the whole search and the quest for that unconscious drive to uncover something more primary, something more ancient, right? Let's look, as the tzaddikim did, at Freud as an iteration of Mashiach ben Yosef, right? I heard this from a big tzaddik, that Mashiach ben Yosef is the concealment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's process in history. Mashiach ben David is the revelation of Hashem's process outside of history. And the paradigm that we have for this operation of revealing Hashem's process within history itself is Yosef HaTzadik, Safnas Paneach. And there were three things that Yosef HaTzadik did that reiterate themselves later on in the generations closer to the Geula. And one was interpret dreams, one was reorient the capitalistic system, and one was just generally reorient the way in which human beings grasp consciousness. And some of the concepts of Mashiach ben Yosef is they can't reveal themselves, they have to hide. And so we have this in the same generation where Freud interpreted dreams. His first book was The Interpretation of Dreams. He saw dreams as the royal road to the unconscious, something that he drew deeply, deeply, deeply from the ninth parak of Brachos. And so that was Freud. There was Karl Marx, who reoriented the capitalistic system by revealing kind of a socialistic notion that the Bala Sulam saw as significant. And then there was Einstein, who kind of reoriented relativism and the way in which objectivity and subjectivity merged together. And so all of that is to say that Freud, when he was trying to describe his relationship with what he was searching for at the core, he referred to it as this oceanic sense. This oceanic sense, which was the sense of his description of Bittul, of Mayim b'Mayim. Mayim b'Mayim, coming to a place of where the Mayim Tachtoinim are now contained once again within the Mayim Elyonim. There's the Gra and Safradit's news, so the way he's going to show the Iker core of the Tzimtzum is the Rikia bein Mayim l'Mayim. So there's a whole watery pathway in which a person can understand the more fiery pathway of Or, which is a different type of metaphor. I sense that I'm meandering a bit.
Okay, it's just the edge.
Da, ki tchilas hakol hayakol metzias Or Pashut v'nikra Ein Sof. V'lo hayasham shum chalal v'shum avor panoi. So before existence, there was infinite light. HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals this infinitude prior to all of existence. And that's all that existed to the degree that there was nothing but it. There was no empty, vacant space. There was no halal. And there was no empty air. There was no empty pockets of air. And these two metaphors, the avir panui is going to kind of like be thrown away in the discussion to one degree or another. But this is a prime example of where Rav Chaim Vital is revealing and like winking, so to speak, that all of the Torah of Rav Yisrael Sarug, all of these upper worlds that he's not talking about, he also knows all about. That's this avir panui, which is breath and a lot of different iterations. So there was no vacant space and there was no empty air. Everything was the infinite light. So before the creation of the world, there was no possibility of otherness. Hashem's light filled all possibility. There was no room for anything. At the same point, because we're already aware that this is not the essence of God himself, we have to assume that everything that's going to be revealed after the tzimtzum of this infinite light was also, on one level or another, present already within the infinite light prior to the tzimtzum itself. Why? Because tzimtzum, as we're going to understand very clearly, is not removal or emptying, but tzimtzum is revealing by way of concealing. Hashem is revealing more of himself. So all that existed prior in this realm of Or Ein Sof, which was Hashem already chose at a certain point, way before the script is what we're trying to understand, of a tzimtzum ritzonit, that Hashem chose to enter into this possibility of even being before creation. That we always affirm. Hashem chose to exist. But this Or Ein Sof, that before the Tzimtzum, that occupies all space, is going to reveal after the Tzimtzum that it already had everything contained within itself. But we can't say that there was anything there, right? The moment we say or ascribe limits or levels to the infinite light that existed prior to the Tzimtzum, we're over the Isser that the Ravid describes of applying limits to the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this is what Gans Chasidus is ultimately all about, ways of developing and cultivating a language to describe the pre-existence, so to speak, of the possibility of reality and creation already within the infinite light itself prior to the creation of the world. So that instead of seeing existence as the severing off of the light that preceded it, we can now much more comfortably and faithfully see reality as an emergent extension of that infinite light that existed prior to the creation of the world. Tzimtzum stops being this scary, contracting kind of removal that leaves a blackness or a void, and it becomes the pathways through which HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in his infinite rachamim and mercy, decided to reveal himself to us. Yeah? In Chabad and Chasidus, the mashal, the metaphors that best reveal this is going to be the Tzur Chalamish. The Tzur Chalamish is the flintstone, so to speak, that contains the potential of the emergent spark, but it can only be awoken, meaning the metaphors I'm using are very specific. I'm going to use them in a clunky way now. Each one represents a different thing. But there's the pre-existence of the spark within the flintstone. There's the pre-existence of the or within the ma'or, the light within the luminary, as the Baal Tanya explains in Shar Yichud V'Emunah. That's the ray of the light within the light itself, within the sun itself. It's there because we see it emergent downwards, but it's meaningless when it's in the face of the luminary. And there's also going to be the shalhevet b'toicha gacheles, the potential of the flame that exists already within the coal in like an unrevealed way. But all of these, and ultimately, Chaver, you with me? I think you're with me. To be with you guys. But ultimately, all of these come back to one source. And this, to me, is the bedrock, and it's not to me, Chalila B'chas, it's to all of the tzaddikim. That the bedrock of what we're going to be discussing here is rooted in the Beis Medrash of Gerona, Spain, of Rabbeinu Azriel of Gerona. They were brothers, Rabbeinu Azriel of Gerona and Rav Ezra of Gerona. They were Talmidim of Rav Yitzchak Sagi Nahor, which is ultimately, they were Talmidim of the Ramban or Rebbeim of the Ramban? Rebbeim of the Ramban, right, okay. It's important to, I'm a big Amar, it's mamish. But that is the source, that is the linchpin, so to speak, of what we can grasp of the origin of what the Ari is describing, and what Chassidus is describing, and what the Gra is describing, what the Ramchal is describing, and what Musar is describing, and what the Torah is telling us. And Rabbeinu Azriel, we're not going to get into the truth value of this statement. It's true because it's what the tzaddikim believe in. That's why it's true. And I trust the tzaddikim, right? Mishanu Miftach l'tzaddikim. They let them struggle with how it's true. We Mishanu Miftach l'tzaddikim. Once the true tzaddikim wrote it, so it's choik nasam v'leyav, or it's chakut b'chachikas halev, that it's a metzias gomer. If we choose to tap into that metzias of the true tzaddikim, so then we activate it in our lives. If we don't, then chaval. I just saw today from the Maharal in Nesiv HaEmunah that Emunah is ultimately going to be the measure in which God reveals himself to you in the future. That the capacity that you offer up to God, so to speak. Emunah for the Maharal, as I read it in a short sefer from Rav Greenwald, the therapist from Muncie, who was very close with the Stipler Gaon. I bought the second volume of it today. Amazing person, sefer. But he brought there that the Maharal says that the Ikar Tefillah is believing, the Ikar Emunah is believing ultimately that Hashem can do anything. He can take you out of any situation. He can fix anything. It's believing that there is literally no limit in the front of what Hashem can do. All of the limitations are with regards to our understanding. but there's no limitation. And it works in the sense that the more power you give to God, the more power God will reveal to you. Ultimately, as I understood it in the future, it's like Rabbi Nachman says, we're going to point in the future, Zeh Hashem kivinu lo. Taka tzu dem got habihir gehept. This is the God that I grasped in the past. And now it's being revealed to me now, which means we could taste it now. And Rabbeinu Azriel said it, and therefore it's true. He says that in order for the infinite to be truly infinite, in order for the limitless to be truly limitless, it must contain within itself the capacity to reveal itself by way of limit. The bilti gvul, that which is without limit, must contain itself, so to speak, the capacity or the potential towards the revelation within limit. Because if you were machaser, if you denied the reality of the potential towards limitation from the unlimited, you would be revealing a deficiency within the completely perfect, because it's missing the capacity towards emergence revelation. It's missing the chisaron, shleimus b'li chisaron. But at the same point, if you affirm chisaron within shleimus, and you affirm koyach hagvul, the potential towards limitation within the bilti gvul, so then again, we're running up against the issue of what the Ravid describes as creating levels within the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so, Rabbeinu Azriel comes upon a middle ground, a hidden middle ground, which is called Koyach HaGvul Bebilti Gvul, the unlimited potential towards limitation. Koyach HaGvul Bebilti Gvul. It's the potential towards limitation that is not yet an actualized form of limitation to the degree that we are liable to see it as somethingness in the realm of nothingness. It's nothing. It's pure potential. The greatest metaphor that we have for this is what the Tzemach Tzedek brings in Mitzvahs Ha'emanas Elokus in Derech Mitzvah, what he heard from his Zayda, the Balatanya. It's like Yechoiles. It's possibility. It's the possibility to express a surge of energy in any particular area of the body prior to even deciding which area I would like to express energy in. It's pure possibility. In the language of the Rebbe Rashab, through the Rambam, and as what I understand through the Rebbe Shlita, or Vitchemeyer, it's referred to as Metzias She'ena B'Metzias. It's a non-existent existence. It's a non-existent existence. There's no limitation there. There's no actual limitation. It's this we're talking about. It's Hasag of Eino Musag, but it's even more than Eino Musag. We're talking about the highest levels where it's far beyond, it's Bilti Musag, right? It's the gradations of that which is unknowable. It's not because my mind is not strong enough to grasp, it's because it's literally ungraspable. That changes the whole story, right? And so this Koyach HaGvul B'Bilti Gvul reveals to us something, that all of the eventual unfolding that we're going to see in what we're generally going to refer to from now on as the Seder HaYishtalshlus, the process of the unfolding of the worlds.
All this is a muscle of Ein Sof.
Is Metzias a mashal of Ein Sof?
No, this lack of Metzias.
This lack of Metzias,
This unimaginable imagination is what Ein Sof is.
It's the Or Ein Sof. It's the Or Ein Sof that existed prior to the creation of the world. But it's the Or Ein Sof that existed. That itself is a Giloi, like we said. It's what the Arizal amazingly refers to, and he says this is not even real, but he refers to it in Shar Mem Beis as Malchus the Ein Sof. Meaning there's never a time where we're getting stuck in thinking that we've grasped the ultimate level. Never. You know? I just saw from the Heilige, was it the Chayze? I saw from the Chayze that Yaakov Avinu wanted Rachel. Rachel is grasp. And in the morning he found Leah. Leah is ungraspability, yearning. Rachel is everything as it is, present. No need to contemplate it is, it's there. That's what Yaakov Avinu wants. He wants Beis HaMikdash. Right? He wants it to be an undeniable presence. Malchus b'tikuno. His Iker desires Yosef and Binyamin. It's tzaddikim. But ultimately, the way Metzias goes is that anytime a person desires to reach the full culmination of something, ultimately they come to find in the next moment that, it's Leah. Right? Leah is Anava. and Rachel is Yira, Ekev Anava Yiras Hashem. That the heel of Anava, which is Leah, is the emergence of Yiras Hashem. Yiras Shemayim is the Iker. Yiras Shemayim is the Beis HaMikdash. The Mittler Rebbe says that Yiras Shemayim will only be revealed in the future. But what do we mean when we say Yiras Shemayim? We mean what Rav Hillel Paracher writes in Nukuda Dalid in his Biurim on the Mittler Rebbe's Shari Yichud, that it's the first halach in Shulchan Aruch, Shavisi Hashem Lenegdi Tamid. That fear should seize a person when they contemplate the presence of God. And Zot the Heiliger of Hillel Paracher, and the Rebbe Shlita said this is like the Aleph Beis of Chassidus. He says that they spoke in Lashon Nigla, right? It's Nigla Satorah. They spoke in Lashon Nigla. I wish I had the source on me. I don't. Maybe, but he says that Shavisi Hashem the Negdi Tamid ultimately means that all that exists is Hashem. All that exists is Hashem. I don't exist. I exist as a blip within the real reality of Hashem, a Yira Ilah, presence of divine light. We're always searching for Rachel. We want Beis HaMikdash. We want that graspability. But ultimately, what we'll come to find is ultimately going to be Leah. So this Koyach HaGvul, this Or Ein Sof is the Or Ein Sof of Rav Chaim Vital and the Arizal's Kabbalah is the highest level that we begin to think about. It's not the highest level that's spoken about. There's levels far beyond, so to speak, this infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that's being spoken about here. Because we have to respect the greatness of God. We have to respect the impossibility of grasping God. Right? When Rabbi Nachman would lean back and say, God is gross. God is gross, that God is big. He's bigger than big. And he extended and he took the time to utter that extension. God is so far beyond comprehensibility. The only way of comprehension is existence itself. And the further down we go the number line, the closer we come to Mashiach, we come closer to reality itself. Right? Reality itself, Malchus, the Zeir of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But ultimately, all of this existed prior to the creation of the world as well. And the creation of the world, the Tzimtzum, is going to be the revelation of that which existed by way of potential. It's the Koyach HaGvul being revealed. Before the Tzimtzum, there was infinite light, Or Pashut. Simple light, uncomplicated light. We just kind of describe this space of possibility, an impossible space of possibility, the place of highest levels of abstraction, and we're saying it's Pashut. How can you say it's Pashut? Chazal have already given us the language. Shraga b'tihira mayahani. A candle in the sun is worthless. What does it do? The candle continues to exist, it's there, but its light is so dimmed in the face of its luminous source that it's as if it doesn't even exist, in spite of the fact that it does exist. And that's just a mashal to the mashal of this pre-existence of the possibility of limitation. But ultimately, the Tzimtzum is the concealment of the unlimited light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the concealment of the luminous source of the sun. And Mela, when the sun is removed, so to speak, the ray of the sun is seen. Right? The limit now appears. Because somehow, some way, in spite of the fact that it has no existence of its own, this Metzias, She'ena b'Metzias, this non-existence existence, this Koyach HaGvul b'Bilti Gvul, this Or Ein Sof, or what the Arizal is going to describe as this Malchus to Ein Sof, really. Just the edge of that which is truly infinite, the lowest edge of it. So the more we come to understand that, that's what we're trying to draw down into the system. That's Or Ein Sof. We're trying to draw more and more down. How can you draw down more Ein Sof? It's infinite because we haven't even begun. Infinite is infinite, and every new level of iterational awareness of the infinitude of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is another world being revealed. As the Zohar HaKadosh describes fundamentally in its introduction, and Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Lazar are walking, they say we are creating worlds with our words. And in the realm of Kabbalah Sa'arizal, as Leshem makes clear, the worlds that we're creating are the greatest possible worlds. That's why reading these words is so fundamental. And so there was no empty space. It wasn't revealed. There was no aver panui. Meaning to say, it's almost like a child, like lahavdil, like a child saying, like, before I walk into the house, I didn't eat cookies and I didn't drink juice. what's my mind going to think? You probably ate cookies and you probably drank juice, right? And so the fact that the way that the Arizal describes the non-existence of existence as there was no empty space and there was no empty air, and everything was filled with infinite light, so we have to come to understand that the halal, to a certain degree, existed prior to the creation of the world as well. It's just being revealed through the Tzimtzum. The halal ha-Tzimtzum, the empty space through which existence is going to unfold, is just the revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's possibility and potential light. Be'ezras Hashem, every second is a moment of drawing more infinite light down. I don't know where we're holding in time or comprehension or.
How can we even say mouth is the Ein Sof?
We can't. It's a mushal. It's a mushal.
There's no differentiation. Seriously.
Language is a fundamental part of this Torah. One can say that language and the restoration of language is the fundamental goal. All tzaddikim come ultimately to a place of dibor. Rabbi Nachman takes it the furthest, where he describes his bepeh, right, of talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in your own voice, turning your Torah into tefillah.
Godliness
Yeah.
is problematic with the rivals issues of
Hagshama.
yeah, of enlightenment. Grace is small.
Grace, sure, and this is where we come into the complexities of language, right? You can see on a certain level the Shar Kavanos in Pesach that the Ari describes. He sees the whole history of Adam Arishon as this retrieval of language, retrieval of lost language. That language was in exile. My friend David Weinberg wrote a really good book called the Beginning of Speech, I think it's called, or Birth of Spoken Word, where he charts human experience through the development of language and then the descent of language. The Arizal is cultivating a very delicate, dak shebedak, symbolic language that is not only symbolic, but it's symbolic of the thing itself, to the degree that the metaphor contains a certain reverberating light of the thing that it's coming to describe. Metaphor and mashal language in the Ari, we should have a full shir about it, because this is ultimately where the Leshem Shelo B'Chaloma and his historic kind of debate with those who are reading the Ramchal's interpretation of Kabbalas Arizal too metaphorically, the Leshem makes fundamentally clear what we're doing when we're talking about these terms, Or and Oilamos and Kalim. Are they worlds? Are they real? Are they not real? And ultimately, it's a scientific language to the degree that by chanting the words themselves, we activate these realities.
But we're never referring to substances, right?
Never. Chalila v'chas. But we're never without it either. Right? If we're good on time, I'm good to go weiter. I don't know what time it is.
This whole hierarchy that you described last week, the Parsufin and the
That's way after the Tzimtzum.
So that's all the art coming through that?
All of the Or coming through. That's why it's such a remarkable thing that Hakdama Achas Kaileles Ein Sof Ad Zeir Anpin. Zeir Anpin is so far from the level that we're talking about. It's so limited. It's so concrete. It's so defined. It's halacha. It describes itself fundamentally in halacha in the Torah. That the reality of it, even being in the introduction, is indicative of the entire project here.
It's finite.
It's coming to teach us why the Torah and the mitzvahs are the only way to do things. That's what the Kabbalas Arizal can't be as interpretive and as redemptive and as cosmic and as analytic and as psychological and as poetic and as mournful and ecstatic. The light of the Arizal it contains all colors, but ultimately the greatest vessel is what the Arizal, and really the only vessel is what the Arizal himself did, which was Torah and mitzvahs. And Torah and mitzvahs is their Anpin. We have, meaning picking the path to one degree or another, the technologies, whatever Torah and mitzvahs means to the individual at their moment in existence. When people would come to the Arizal for fixing because they had done God knows what we feel we've fallen is nothing compared to the fallings that these people described. They're written in books. People fell. The Talmidim, it didn't matter what generation. The nature of being a Yid is that you fall down, you get back up. And what the Arizal would do is he said, have this yichud, have this tikkun, meaning there's a different path that's opened up by the Arizal, and ultimately much more by the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh and everybody who comes afterwards. which is that in spite of the infinite light that is being conveyed in these teachings, the reason we have access to these things, like we started off with, is because the medicine is hidden here. That the technology is where the medicine is. By contemplating these things, by thinking about the world in this way, from the vantage point of Zeir Anpin, the Arizal is also saying, like, where do you think I'm talking from? All of the tzaddikim are still talking ultimately from this world. That's the chiddush of the tzaddikim. But they're speaking, Banamatem Lashem Lekechem, Zun of Atzilus Kavyachol. That's Zeir Anpin and Malchus. Doesn't matter how big a tzaddik is. Reality is reality. Reality is 6,000 millennia with all of the infinitudes that are contained therein. And that's six. That's a vak. That's only the lower levels. It doesn't matter who you are. It's Adam, David, and Mashiach. We're all part of the same exact body. And so the Arizal was given permission to mamish, bring down this language. But the nature, to summarize what we didn't even begin, is what Reb Chaim Volozhiner uses this lashon. Rabbi Nachman uses this lashon. The Lashem Shalom Bachaloma uses this lashon. The Baal HaSulam uses this lashon. The Rebbe Shlita uses this lashon, and others use it as well. It's mamish kavyachol. Mamish kavyachol. That's the way in which we have to grasp these ideas that are being described. Mamish kavyachol. They're real and they're not real at once. They're real to the degree that we know that they exist. We know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has chosen to reveal himself. Why? Because here we are. Zeir Anpin. Here I am. That's where the Arizal was holding also. From Ein Sof ad Zeir Anpin. Why? Because that's where we are. That's our job, is to reveal godliness through the human frame. Which is why the whole Seder HaHishtalshalos after the simple light is going to take the shape ultimately of Adam Kadmon. The shape of this primordiality of human contemplation of divine presence. And so that's just like, again, that's a lot packed, trying to bring what I've learned and what I've kind of tried to understand into the words themselves, so that we see that these words are meant to be ultimately they're meditative, right? They're meditative. They're songs that with these words now, right? This is Or Ein Sof Pashut. This is already, we're just talking about what's referred to in external history as theosophical Kabbalah, right? Or theoretical Kabbalah. We're talking about machshava and the realm of thinking and emunah. But there's also a real applied physics to this. Now, Chalila v'chas to separate between the two of them, we know better. When you look at Shari Kedusha from Reb Chaim Vital, you see in Shar Dalet, ultimately, the whole thing is fundamentally rooted in the ancient path of meditative Kabbalah, so to speak. Before the Arizal revealed what he revealed, where breath was the fundamental vehicle, and contemplation of light, this makes its way into halacha l'maisa. If you read the Meforshim on the Shulchan Aruch about how you're supposed to feel when you daven, right? You put that on a pamphlet and sell that as like a retreat. You'd get like, everyone would be like, oh, look at this guy promising, redemption. Describing his pashtus agashmias, where it's like b'chaloma daber bo, your lips are quivering, and halavai, but when you touch the toe, you're touching the whole body, right? So even one letter of real tefillah. Kitzer, this is the avodah. The ikr is the avodah. The ikr is to bring all of this down. The Arizal tried to save Klal Yisrael from the head, as the Baal HaSulam says, around the shoulders. And ultimately that did not succeed. The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh came and grabbed Klal Yisrael up from the torso, from the area of the heart. Now, the only way that the Baal Shem Tov had the confidence and the strength to do such a thing was because of the Arizal that preceded him. Right? As we know, I told this story before, there was a sick child of one of the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov, and he was very ill. And they ran and they called the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. They ran and called the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, and he walked in and he said, do you know who I am? And the baby said, you're the Arizal. And the Baal Shem Tov said, you're going to be fine. So I sometimes think about that in the context of us as being the sick child, right? That there's a generation that's in a deep sickness. And the answer is realizing that the words of the Arizal are fundamentally expressed within the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov. It fixes a major pagam. I don't know what time it is again, and I don't want to hold anybody. But the Iker Tikkun, one of the Iker Tikkunim, and this is what Rav Itchemeyer describes in a Meimei called, I forget exactly what the Meimei is called, but it's about the distinction between Hasidus of the Baal Shem Tov and the Kabbalah of the Arizal. What did the Baal Shem Tov come and add? Meimei Eitz Chaim, Derech Eitz Chaim. It's a remarkable Meimei that describes, and the Piazetzna Rebbe Hashem Yimkom Doma ultimately was not the first, but the one who really cultivated this project in Mavos Sha'arim in a remarkable way. But ultimately, when you take Kabbalah without Chasidus, you get stuck in a system that has a particular end, especially the Kabbalah of the Arizal, because the Arizal doesn't speak about, in this context, the Arizal only hints to the worlds that exist above infinitude. And so the ultimate beginning is infinitude itself. If you're just taught it on an external level, which means that there's a graspable origin. Heaven forbid, because if I grasp the ultimate origin, then what happens with me? I become perfect like the origin, and then I become God itself. And I grasp perfection, heaven forbid. I grasp the essence, because it's a limited system. And Chasidus comes to reveal that which has always been present within the very core of what the Arizal was doing, is that no, this Or Ein Sof is just a remez b'davar to that which exists far beyond it. But it's the graspable point of beginning. But when you arrive back at the top, it's endless beginnings and ascensions. That's what Chasidus comes to reveal. Every mimer from the Nisiim, from the Alter Rebbe down to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, each and every one of them are describing the endlessness of infinitude. Every one of the Ramchal Svarim, more historic and more present and ready at hand and available in real time in the historic kind of like battle, But in Chassidus, it came to the realm of the Maggid of Mezrich, gave endless points of contemplation of this reality. And they're each real. And so Chassidus protects you. Chassidus ensures that you never feel that you're getting stuck at the top, because then you become an idol and it becomes idolatrous, and then you're already stuck. And the Parsufim become objects, God forbid, or real things that are meant to be, sold. It's not even a critique of anything. I'm not critiquing anything. But so Kabbalah without Chassidus is dangerous, and Chassidus without Kabbalah is, so you're, Avad. The Bittul is ultimately the Baal Shem Tov revealed somehow, some way that Bittul, Emuna, Aleph Beis, Avodas, Pshutos, simplest things in the world. This brings you directly to the Kedusha that's above anything, to daven like a Tinok that reaches and breaches all boundaries. But that's only after the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh and after all of the Tzaddikim and the Gra and the Ramchal and the Rashash. But the Baal Shem Tov without the Arizal, you're missing out on more than half. You're missing out on the pratim. You're missing out on the sense of reality that enables you to enjoy the recognition of non-reality, right? You bask in the endlessness of light all day in the Baal Shem Tov, so it grows particularly boring, right? Tainuk tamidi eino tainuk. The endlessness is, it's boring. You want to feel the joy and the vibrancy and the enhancement that comes about by way of limitation. And that's going to be the kalim, the pratius of the Arizal. That's why the Arizal's language is going to be so common of like numerological. It's down to like numbers. It's math, right? It's like the basic zeros and ones of existence. It's like quantum. And it's very particular, and it takes a lot to hold. And a person with a mathematical mind and a visual mind will have an easier time. And there's people who walk around with a fundamental knowledge of all this without an ounce of Yirah Shamayim. And there's people with an ounce of Yirah Shamayim who don't know a word of this. And so, like anything in the world, without bittul, it doesn't work. Without bittul, it doesn't work. But we're mevatel ourselves to the tzaddikim, for the Ari HaChai. We should be zoicha to Otzros Chaim, right? Otzros Chaim. Otzros Chaim, right? Megala mukos minei choshech. Should be zoicha. Okay, Chav, I apologize for the meanderings tonight.